Hello and welcome to Technical Utkranti, and today we'll be looking on to the first question involving stack or queue, and let's begin with it. But before that, let's have a look for the thought for the day. Okay, so the first question is checking for balanced parentheses. Nothing complicated here. Basically, the way we used the brackets while writing any expression in a code or a mathematical expression, we need to write the algorithm which would state whether the use of brackets in the expression is valid or not. So let's understand the question in more detail. You are given a string which will have only 6 types of characters, closed and open brackets of these 3 types. We just need to determine if the string is valid or not. What are the conditions for string validity? Open bracket must be closed by the same type of bracket that we already know, right? For example, this is valid and this is not valid. Second condition is brackets should be in the correct order. For example, this is valid, this is also valid, this is not valid, and this is not valid. All right? Or in other words, we can say that the way we write mathematical expression involving brackets, that way is valid and others are not. All right? So let's understand the approach. For example, we are given a string like this. How are we going to solve it? If you look at starting from the left, if you see the first closing bracket, the first closing bracket should have an immediate opening bracket. That is the most important condition. If that condition is not there, it means that before the closing bracket there is an opening bracket of some other type, right? This is the check of invalidity, the first check of invalidity. The first closing bracket should have an immediate opening bracket of the same type, right? So for example, this condition where we see that the first closing bracket has any other kind of opening bracket, that is invalid, right? If that's not the case, then the string is invalid. All right, so we basically pass through the string, and on encountering the first close bracket, we find what is the bracket just before it, and if it is the opening bracket of the same type, then both of them are removed from the string and the same operation is done on the string. For example, after removing these two characters, we get this kind of string, and again the first closing bracket becomes this guy, and the bracket or the character just before it is the opening bracket of the same type. We remove both of them. After that, we are just left with this, and we again find that the condition that we have just described is valid for this also, and hence this particular string of characters is valid, right? So let's look at the code. So what are we doing in the code? Okay, we have created a class called solution, and we are passing the string into it. All right, so what does this class does? This is the magic function which basically initializes our queue, we can say. Okay, and when we call this method is valid, what it does is it basically iterates over all the characters of the string starting from the left to right. We just look for the closing brackets of the 3 type. The first character, whatever it is, if it is not a closing bracket, then it basically becomes the part of the queue that we have initialized, right? So all of this information that I am doing over here, this is just for finding a closed bracket, and if it's not a closed bracket, it goes into the list or the queue, right? So whenever the first closing bracket of any kind is encountered, we see that if there is something in the list that we have stored for it, right? So any other kind of brackets, if they are there in the list, so its length would be greater than 0. Okay, and then the element just before the opening bracket is just before the closing bracket is the opening bracket of the same type, then we delete basically the opening bracket and we do not insert the closing bracket, right? Yeah, to the custom list. Okay, and if this condition is not true, then we return false. Same condition, same this piece of code is applied for this bracket type and this bracket type. Okay, so if we parse through the entire characters in the string and we never encountered this condition, right, that the closing bracket is encountered but the opening bracket is not just before it, okay, then we return false. Otherwise, if the entire string is passed through and this condition is not encountered, then we say that the string is valid. So as you can see, this is the valid string, valid string, valid string. This is also valid, this is also valid, but this is invalid. So let's see what we get. As you can see, for the first 5 strings we get true and the last one we get false. If you understood the approach, the question and the Python code of it, do hit like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Bye bye.